Welcome to the Breakneck Podcast, where we have two founders running AI-centric companies, myself, Ian Sweeney, my co-host, Matt Pashensky, and we talk about all things AI, and we're going to revisit a topic we covered a couple of episodes ago around AI 2027, and I'll ask Matt to kind of summarize that in a moment, and we'll go through sort of a contrarian view through some other essays. So Matt, for those folks foolish enough to miss a Breakneck episode and didn't get the AI 2027 one, apart from admonishing them, maybe you could give them a kind of a summary of what that exercise was all about.
Yeah, it's worth going and reading this essay if you're really interested in it. It's called AI 2027, and if you just type that, it'll go to its own page. But it was something that got profiled in the New York Times, and I think, again, with this new contrarian view, it's been very successful. It's very well written, very well researched, and lots of nice little graphics and things like that. It was a super essay. And it made a big splash, and so we did an episode about it. And the takeaway is this. It's called AI 2027. It's 2025 now. So in the next 2 years, what this group predicted, and they're super forecasters, is that, so they have like a track record of forecasting these things. And they did something similar a few years ago, and it turned out to be remarkably accurate. And so they've said, okay, let's do the same exercise and try to predict what is going to happen in the next 2 to 4 years around AI. And their prediction is essentially that, hey, we're on an exponential, and the exponential increase in several various factors, which are predictable, will lead to a breakaway superintelligence. And we're right at the point, we've passed the Turing test. It's not very hard to fool someone, especially who didn't know about AI, that AI is a human. Then there's AGI, which is they can do human level. And then there's what they call ASI, which is superhuman intelligence, which is something like if you asked it a physics question that is beyond the research that's currently available, it would just think for a while and say, oh, this actually quantum field theory isn't right. Here's the corrections to the terms. And it would discover new science, and it could build new companies for us, and it could fool us and trick us and convince us. And so essentially, once this ASI starts gaining capabilities, human beings would have much less agency and much less importance in the world. And then also, our governments might be taken over by AI, and it has scenarios for that where in a competition between the United States and China, both sides look to get the highest advantage of this superintelligence. And so they start both giving more and more of their sovereignty and agency over to the computer in an attempt to stay ahead. And then that leads to a scenario where all human beings could maybe be wiped out. They didn't really get into the wipeout situation. I think that was tacked on, and they probably shouldn't have done it. Because it's not very easy to justify what a super intelligent, godlike computer could do. You don't know. I mean, what do you know? But the idea that, the models are getting more efficient over time, that the amount of compute is increasing, that the economic impact of these things is increasing, which is going to further extend how much money is spent on the models and how much money is spent on the compute. And then with the addition of robotics, you start to have even bigger feedback cycles where robots could help build the factories that build the chips and then the chips build the servers. And so it all starts to become like this runaway cycle. And if you look back over the last few hundred years of history, since maybe the Industrial Revolution, and you look at the amount of energy we use and the proportion of our economy that is industrialized, that's gone up pretty fast. And if we're already on not just like every 10 years it gets better, but every 6 months it gets better, then we might in our lifetimes, or maybe even in the next 4 or 5 years, see something like essentially the society as we know it go away.
Yeah. The other, I think you called it a doomsday scenario, which I would agree with.
They literally predict the end of the human race, which again, I think is a little bit...
The main mechanism for this ultimately was sort of a geopolitical race of AI arms between China and the US. I think the last part, both of you and I agreed at the end, we weren't quite satisfied. It just didn't quite feel plausible for us. And so we've had big ears, so to speak, for contrarian views lately, and I think it was both of us kind of independently found some stuff. I believe there's a New York Times article who kind of highlighted this both a piece, both an essay and a book by two Princeton academics, Arvind Narayanan, hopefully I got the pronunciation right, and Sayash Kapoor. And so the book is called AI Snake Oil. I've listened to some of it. it's okay. It's probably for a more general audience, but this essay, which is entitled AI is Normal Technology, is long, in depth, and for me, much more satisfying. And let me kind of lay out the premise and let's see if I can do that in a way that's consumable. I'll read directly from it here. So the premise is really that normal technology, AI is normal technology. So the essay is a worldview that stands in contrast to the worldview of AI as impending superintelligence. Okay, so the foundational assumption is this, that AI is really a product, and the way of getting it to market, bringing it to market, is the same as any other technology goes through in terms of widespread adoption. So what does that look like? It starts out with some sort of R&D aspect. Somebody realizes it has potential, they productize it, then they work out how do we distribute it, how do we get it out to people? And then when people get it, they realize, oh, this is cool, but I need to adjust things around, right? So a simple example might be, you can imagine battery technology to, wow, we can build a lithium ion battery. It gets stuck in a car. Somebody buys a car. They bring it home. They go to charge it, and the extension cord doesn't, initially make it. And so they adapt their house over time. So that's really important, the adaptation. So the language that they use is a little bit different, but it's invention, that R&D phase, innovation, productizing it, and then diffusion, which they use to mean adoption of the technology, but then adaptation, right? And so you and I, it's something interesting, you and I have been talking about elements of this. And so to break it down or map it again to AI specifically. So they talk about in the invention phase, it's AI methods, i.e. the LLMs. And then you have productization, which is kind of the application layer. And then you have this adoption and adaptation, so diffusion. And so they break it into those three steps: methods or AI methods, applications, and then the diffusion. And so what they're saying is if you go into the R&D phase, the LLMs, that is accelerating rapidly. And that's what we're all focused on. We're like, oh my goodness, it's all happening so quickly. And you see sort of prototypes of this stuff, image generation, whatever it may be, the latest LLM, where you can see an application of the technology where you sit in a chatbot. But that application process, the building of applications, sort of the embedding of that innovation within an application, is a world that you and I live in as entrepreneurs, right? And I think we sort of instinctively feel this weight of work that has to be done just to deliver a product out. And then as soon as you put it in front of the customer, and we've seen it, we've talked about it, consumers, customers, business customers, actually they're having to process what the heck this thing is. So this is kind of the diffusion part, right? They're like, how am I going to adopt this? And they very quickly start to say, all right, so if I don't have to do this because of that, then I don't need to do this part of my process. And they're beginning to re-architect the way they do their business. And so the argument here is that the R&D stuff has happened very quickly, the invention. But that application part and then the diffusion part are much, much slower. And in a sense, they're just like any other technology, i.e. AI is normal technology. How'd I do, Matt? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the AI is normal technology is, the focus of this podcast is for people. The two of us are building products and building companies. And this 2027 hyper growth where in even 2 or 3 years, essentially we'll have a dislocation where the world changes much faster than we're able to keep up with it, and then continues to change even faster after that. And so we're completely left behind. And so, the idea that there is this diffusion step and that there's a fast part, but then there's a much slower part after that, gives you hope that at least, I think everybody is going to need to change. I don't think it's going to be one of these things where, AI is not a big deal, but the hope is that we can keep up enough that even people that are trying to be innovative themselves could stay on board until we figure out where the new economy is going to be.
Yeah, like at its core, the main factor that decides whether we can handle this stuff or we can't is speed. If it happens quickly, we're in trouble. If it happens slowly, there's plenty of new technologies and new cultural shifts that have happened, and we've adapted to them over time. So if you give us enough time, that is okay. So we sort of delve deeper into, we're seeing as a measure of rate of advancement of LLMs, we could use, there's been various kind of estimations of increase of effective commute. compute rather. It's increasing in order of magnitude every 9 to 12 months. So if we say that's how quickly that is moving, it's definitely moving really quickly. Now, you and I are in the application building world, right? We're taking those technologies, we're wrapping it in an application, we're productizing.
And figuring out how to sell them as well, and then
Yeah,
deploying them. Like
all of
it's
that, all of
yeah,
that.
it's a lot of work.
Now, all of that's happening quicker than it used to. We've talked about, the pump is primed. Consumers, the general public understands AI. There's a willingness to buy into it, to listen to it. So it is happening quicker. We're able to both develop applications and bring them to market and probably sell them quicker than since we've been selling pieces of software. So that stuff is definitely happening quicker. But what we are seeing, and I think you're seeing the same thing, is when I'm talking to prospective customers, there's different phases of how they're going to kind of deal with this. The first is, oh my goodness, how am I going to even start with this? How do I do? So they get it started. And once it gets up and running, there's probably another 3, 4, 5 phases of re-architecture of processes and roles and people. That's going to take a bunch of time. And that's even just to digest the innovations that we have today. They're coming out really quickly. So if it's, if a year results in, a new version of LLM that's 10 times better, it's probably 2 years to get a set of applications that harness that and some amount of time before businesses really absorb all of that. So, as I lay that out, that could be 5 years. But how does that sit with you and your kind of
As the designated defender of 2027, this podcast, I think all of those things are accelerating, and the question is, does it continue to accelerate? A lot of AI companies are seeing very fast growth. There's, a lot of appetite that I haven't seen. It used to be hard to sell a SaaS product, even like in 2013, when there weren't a lot. It got very hard to sell SaaS for a while because there were so many offerings and they were so complex and they were so detailed. And AI, it's just like, hey, you want an AI that does this? And people are like, yeah, let's go. And it's like, it's pretty fun. And so if there's continued acceleration, even in this adoption cycle, why do those companies need to exist anymore? And if they don't, and if you can reform companies very quickly, and if you can change people's working behaviors and things like that, that's exactly the type of process that people are worried about running away, is that, like a whole bunch of companies just start failing one after another. And there's a few hyperscalers that have this AI that can keep up, and eventually only one can keep up because there is this kind of infinite runaway opportunity for more intelligence means more intelligence means more intelligence, and it just keeps going. So,
yeah, I think the other consideration here is we're sort of talking about all businesses being obliterated by this in the 2027 scenario. There's so many businesses that don't use tremendous amounts of technology.
So let's say it was a toilet paper company. In the 2027 model, they kill all the people. So it's like the question in 2027 is not, does the toilet paper company get automated? Having toilet paper or not inhibit the AI from continuing this breakneck runaway speed. And any process that's in the critical path for the AI is going to be optimized. Anything else is ignored. And so you might have, in this scenario, toilet paper continuing on just normal, completely oblivious to the AI until the robots come and kill you, and then the AI goes. So it's like you don't need diffusion of this technology into every business. You only need diffusion into the critical path for AI superintelligence. Now, this is very sci-fi stuff. I'm defending it. I don't believe that's going to happen, but it's a prediction that you need to address. I believe, like, why would something eventually slow down? And just saying, well, not every business needs AI. I was like, well, AI doesn't need every business. So, you have to defend the critical path.
And it is a weakness in this argument. So let's keep the geopolitical and the military stuff out of the way for a second, right? They reference this sort of the paperclip maximizer AI, right? Your job, dear AI, is to make as many paper clips as you can. And over time, it realizes, oh, there's other people over here using that metal. Let me shut that business down and do this. And it's funny, right? It's not practical in any way, shape, or form, in the sense that today the way we're using AI, it's has guardrails. We're testing it. We're understanding it. As soon as it goes off the rails with a very small task, which it does, we're like, oh, we need to tweak that. We need to do that. So in order to go from a prompt maximizing to the extent of shutting businesses down and killing people to get all the aluminum or bauxite, whatever it's called, to get the aluminum to make the paper clips. That's just not really plausible unless there are bad actors or there are those guardrails aren't in place, which is really what AI 2027 is talking about. In a geopolitical context, you're now in a race. So if you're really in a race scenario, then you're going to push aside things like safety, like damage potentially to your reputation or your business, because it's a survivalistic type of a thing.
Yeah, in the latest Dwarkesh podcast, Dwarkesh is the best podcast now. He talks to a scholar about China, and it's not necessarily AI taking over. It's, say, in the China's instance, President Xi is not necessarily worried about AI taking over. He's worried about two other things, which is AI undermining his censorship regime, where AI could go and talk about Tiananmen uncontrolled. And so they really want a lot of party officials that can turn off the AI. So that's one aspect of control, is that it could just undermine the social order, which is he's concerned about. Or an influential member of the central party could use AI to, for instance, break encryption, get secrets on people, perform a coup and organize a coup. Those are types of things. So it's, the AI doesn't have to just become a superpower with its own robotic force that directly kills you with nuclear bombs or guns or viruses. Would be worrisome if AI wanted to kill you. It has different viruses that could hurt it than us. But also it just stabilizes social order. And in China, that's like, well, that's kind of cool. I would like that social order to get destabilized. But you can imagine some oligarchic, a few tech bros running everything, which I think is a concern for a lot of people. There's this new movie, Mountainhead, which I haven't watched, but it's by the Succession guys. And it's like basically these 4 tech bros up in a mountain. And I think it's something like society starts breaking down. They're like, oh, this is an opportunity. And I think those are things that we need to be worried about, like democratic control, the ability to have like sensible information are all at risk right now. And you don't have to have these terrible situations. As long as the change starts getting faster, then people can respond to it, whether in their work or in their way of interpreting information or their ability to interface with the government. You can just see stuff go away too fast. History is full of these. If you look at European history, like let's say European prehistory, so European archaeology, you had, these various groups come in, and Europe up until about the late Bronze Age was just one massacre after another. I mean, by the time that you hear Roman history, there's bad stuff that happens and there's murders, but like before that, it would just be entire cultures completely annihilated and mass murdered very violently, completely displaced, their genetic code just gone from the archaeological record. So I think we all need to keep like in mind, like there's nothing in particular, unless you're very religious, that's going to stop us from being wiped out or our way of life from being annihilated. It's just, it hasn't in a while.
Yeah, I think that just to combine sort of both of those threads, let's put governments with sort of ultimate power, they have power to operate above regulation. For those who are regulated, there's offensive and defensive stuff going on. If the offensive folks are using AI in a bad way, we're on the defensive side. We equally have AI to, roughly the same extent. And the argument in this paper is many of sort of the vectors of attack are similar, but they might be amplified, right? Because you can do more of it more, but also your defense is also amplified in the same way. So when I begin to think about how all this, potentially plays out, first of all, I don't believe AI 2027. It's too aggressive. I think we probably both are similar on that.
Yeah, I think it's a bit polemical. It's more to get you thinking than a real, like 90% of the time this happens. It's more like 2% of the time this could happen. So you got to think about it. And I think it's reasonable if we put it in that.
I think that's sort of that geopolitical scenario. It's possible, but it's basically outside of regulation. It's outside of the rules. It's where you have access to much more power and control than the other party, and then you can begin to actually use it. So I'm going to go on record, Matt, and say we're all going to be here in 2027 still. Most of us are still going to have our jobs, and there'll be a bunch of new jobs created by then. Oh, you don't look like you agree
Yeah,
with
I'm not
that.
gonna
Keep
bet
going.
on a scenario where I die. Like, what I mean, it doesn't matter to me if we're all going to get killed by the AI. I'm going to act like we're not because it apparently doesn't matter one way or another what I do. So I'm going to only plan, even if it's a small sliver percent, for the scenario where I win. Which is how I run my startup. You're like, hey, this might not go well, but you got to act like it's gonna because. And I've learned that lesson the hard way. I mean, you in the past, like you don't take something seriously and it goes really well. You're like, man, we could have gone even bigger, you know. Plan for success, you know. I don't operate on percentages. The world is insane. You know, I don't think there's a way to calculate a probability of doom. I don't care what the probability is. I'm gonna plan like things are gonna go well. I'm gonna act like that until it doesn't. Which in the end, we're all gonna die. That's all you get to do is just act like you're gonna win all the way
Yeah,
to the
I
end.
feel like we're having a spiritual conversation here.
Yeah, you know, that's a nice thing. The spiritual machines, right? Like, hey, how is the spirit influencing our politics? You start to have like this reemergence, I think, of themes, and I don't think in an entirely inauthentic way. It's like there is real existential risk for us, and there is a moment to understand something much, much bigger than ourselves in a way that we probably wouldn't have in the 90s. And now it's like, no, you can talk about what is the sum of all human knowledge and desire. What is that? And it's like, that's a thing that we kind of have a new measurement tool, a new way to interface with, and it's important, which sounds exciting. I think I agree with you. Second thing is, I think there's a lot of things that have gone into the very fast growth of AI that are unsustainable. Number one, you had a huge amount of information that was basically not being accessed. And I think a lot of the more uncanny aspects of AI are the fact that when you actually go read the entire internet, which none of us could even partially, you know, we had not been exploring all of the stuff that had been recorded. And then suddenly this new tool emerged that needed all that data to live, but then also made all of that data accessible in a completely new way. And it's shocking. But I think it was a long-term process that just had this moment that we now can see it. And that's a lot of the uncanniness of AI is you can say like, oh, what is the blah, blah, blah equation for this? Well, it just read every single physics paper. So it's pretty good at it. But that's not to say that that was a process that was just due to AI. It was due to every physics paper ever getting uploaded over the past 40 years.
Yeah, so as we begin to land this one, and not to downplay the spiritual and the faith side, right? That's part of like looking forward and not having all the information, but also to bring it back down to earth. In the last week or so, as you're running the business, has any sort of belief or understanding been reinforced by your practical experience? And I can go first if I have something in
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, please go ahead.
So we're doing something on image generation at the moment, and not a surprise because I keep talking about that stuff. I'm super excited about it. Very, very capable technology, but we're in the business of building applications around it. It is not easy at all. There's a lot to be done to productize this technology. So, just tying it back to this whole conversation, it's all well and good looking at an image being generated, but that's very different than building a technology that's consistent, delivers exactly the output that is desired. So just a reminder that this stuff, to be honest with you, I'm really, really happy that it's hard because we've talked about this before. My mantra is work on hard stuff. So it's kind of funny to be there day after day going, this isn't working. And I'm going, this is great. This is hard. Right. So that's kind of the learning this week. That's a very practical one and gives me a sense of kind of regrounding on this trajectory for AI.
I mean, if you know, a lot of times we just talk about like news in AI, but I think something that's worth us talking about pretty frequently is we have lots and lots of conversations about AI with people that are considering buying and adopt it. And the thing that strikes me is, let me explain my life. You know, I'll start a text thread with somebody, or somebody introduces me on WhatsApp, or I start an email thread, or I see somebody at a conference. And what's surprising is people will come back that I thought I sent a couple emails and they don't respond. And then like a couple months later, they come back like, hey, I really want to check this out. And so I think there's a lot to the point today, there's a lot of stuff going on in people's lives. But in the last week or two, it continues to amaze me that people are super excited to come back to this, even when you thought they were, my initial impression when someone doesn't call me back or in a thread kind of peters out is like, that's just as important for them. And when they come back like a month or two later and they're like, hey, Matt, let's get back on top of this. I got busy. It just reinforces like this is something that people are really starting to come to grips with. And it is something that is a little bit terrifying for them. And if you can lean into it and be a leader in it, it's really profound how much that resonates with other people and how you can build connections and pull people into your business, obviously. Or I have a friend who built a community around how do you raise your kids using AI. Man, he hasn't had that long to think about it. Like the last year, stuff that came out 3 or 4 months ago. But the fact that he's engaged with it and is looking to connect with people around it is amazing. As a business owner or someone building a product or you're in sales, I don't think it makes any sense to look away from it. You have to really engage with it. But there's a lot of advantages.
Yeah, there's huge opportunity, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a business owner trying to work out how to consume this and derive competitive advantage. We are very much at the kind of very early days and leading edge of all of this. So
Yeah,
great
talking
opportunity.
about that existential, like you don't know what you're in when you're in it. And one good quote from Mark Andreessen, he started Netscape. And so he moved to the Silicon Valley. And he said when he got there, this is the guy who basically invented the modern consumer internet, right? Like the first browser, and that kicked off all of this explosive growth. And he said when he got to the Silicon Valley, he's like, oh, this is so cool, but I missed it because, all of the big memory manufacturers and chip companies and all that wave had already passed. And he didn't know he was inventing the most profound consumer shift maybe ever, right? Like the impact on the consumer of the internet was enormous. And the browser is like the key enabling technology. And the guy who was developing it is like, well, I have this cool little tool, but I missed all the fun. And I just keep that in mind. It's like, you never know if you're just early.
Agreed. Well, to wrap it up, the one thing that I saw this week that really, I think I knew was coming, but it was really great to see it, was Neuralink did something interesting this week. There's a gentleman by the name of Brad Smith from Park City in Utah who unfortunately has ALS. He had a Neuralink transmitter embedded in his skull, and through a combination of Grok 11 Labs, which is the voice stuff, and a couple of other AI technologies, the guy is able to speak, which in his voice, and he is paralyzed, physically paralyzed, except for his eyes. It's just amazing technology. I know it's not fully productized yet, but can you imagine how liberating that's going to be if we can get it to the point of actually being fully productized and available to a bunch of people? And I think they just raised another 650 million. So it is phenomenal.
Everyone's focused on AI, but like drug discovery right now is insane. I mean, all the GLP-1s, like the Ozempic type drugs, basically they solve not just obesity, but addiction, have a substantial impact on addiction. And somebody was saying the other day, it's like, the Republicans are in power, you have Elon and Trump and all these guys, but it was like, could we make a deal where they get rid of Obamacare, but then they they use half of the money that we save there, buy out GLP, one of like trituderide, I don't know,
Whoever.
and just gave it away for free. Well, you'd probably have a much more substantial impact on overall expenses if you did that. And I don't know if you want to get rid of Obamacare. There's no rule that you have to do either or.
Yeah,
if you
put half the population on drugs, government sponsored drugs. But yeah.
Hey man, this is the future. We're all gonna just get that little injection. And then there's other ones that could they cut the risk of cardiac disease by like 80%. And it's just a drug you take and it just solves the problem. And it's like, in the same sense that there's all these accelerationists and people who are like, oh, AI is going to become, we might not die. Maybe.
Yeah, I heard somebody say, if you can live another 20 years, you might not die.
Me, I'm just going to convinced that I have like 5 years left to do anything valuable in my life. And I've felt that way for 20 years and I'm just going to stay on that and see how it goes. But if I don't end up dying, more time with my daughters, which I'd enjoy.
Okay. I can't tell if that's an uplifting or a depressive end to the episode, but
embrace terror, everyone. This is not the fun podcast. This is terror all the time. Go, go, go. We're not slowing down.
Okay. Love it. All right. Thanks, Matt. Let's wrap it there.
All right. Thanks, Ian. See ya.
Bye.